Welcome back, fellow internet adventurers. Get ready for another wild ride through Reddit's strangest stories. We're diving deep into the internet's quirkiest corners. Grab your popcorn and join us on this adventure. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Let's get started. My wife asked for an open marriage, but changed her mind when it started hitting too close to home. I laughed in her face and left her with next to nothing. Hey there, everyone. I never thought that I would join the open marriage cliché, but look at me now. Life comes at you fast. I, a 42-year-old male, have been married to Adriana, a 41-year-old female, for over 15 years now, and we have one child, an 18-year-old female. Our marriage has never been too crazy, both in the positive and negative senses, and for me, that's completely fine. We're not wild or super adventurous people, and we're both introverts, so a calm life is how we like it. I think that's part of the reason why the way things have gone has been a big surprise to me. I think it's necessary to say that our life in the bedroom has always been perfectly fine. Sure, it got to a point where things were a bit boring, but after a talk, we decided to be more vocal about the things we wanted to try and things we thought we'd be into. Ever since then, I think the intimate aspect has improved. I used to worry about that because married couples generally see a drop in frequency over the years, but we, for the most part, buffered against that. I think knowing that, as well as our relatively laid-back natures, should help you understand why I never saw Adriana as the kind of person who'd want to sleep with other people so badly. As far as I knew, she wasn't even very loose back when she was younger. With all this in mind, you should understand why I was absolutely taken aback when she told me on a random weekend that she wanted to talk to me about something. We sat down, and that's how she said it had to do with our bedroom life. Like I said, we've had talks about changing things up in there, but the big difference was that it never seemed as serious as it did that day. She didn't even try to soften the blow. She just said, "I was thinking about us opening our marriage." Honestly, it was such a confusing phrase to me, considering that I never would have imagined her thinking about an open marriage. I had to really think about what open meant in the context of marriage. When it finally clicked for me after about 10 seconds, I looked at her really confused and asked her if she was serious. She just nodded. I asked her what the trigger for this was because this wasn't something she ever seemed interested in beforehand. And I made it very clear to her that an open marriage was a massive thing to try and introduce almost 2 decades into a marriage. According to her, a longer marriage was actually an even better reason for an open marriage because it was a way to keep things fresh. I just shook my head at that because it sounded so ridiculous. I asked her if she was satisfied in the bedroom, but she said that wasn't the problem. I'm sure she thought it sounded smart, but she said it was like eating the same cheese every week. Her assumption was that a new cheese here and it would be nice and would also make her appreciate the old cheese more too. I guess she felt like that was supposed to make me feel better, but that certainly wasn't the case. I told her that I appreciated her explanation of the whole thing, but that I wasn't close to willing to participate in an open marriage. I didn't have the desire to sleep with anyone but her, so it wasn't an appealing idea to me. That was when I noticed she started to get a bit frustrated. Maybe it was because she had imagined that things would go down a lot smoother than they actually did. There was a lot of back and forth, and I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but eventually, Adriana told me that she didn't think it was something she was going to let go of anytime soon. She said she had really thought about the whole thing and that it wasn't some kind of spontaneous thought. Then she tried to sell the idea to me, telling me that I'd be able to get some freshness into the marriage after 15 years. She started trying to paint scenarios of me being able to sleep with women that I meet at bars, the gym, work, and so on. It was exactly because of those scenarios that she was painting that I realized what must have spawned this. They sounded like the plots of adult videos, but as far as I know, she isn't the kind of person who watches that, at least not on a regular basis. That was when I realized that the idea was almost certainly not from videos, but from books. She was a big reader, and it had to be an idea that she got from reading way too much smut. That was when it all made sense. She read some stupid piece of literature where they must have made open relationships look hot and exciting, and now she wanted to give it a run, not realizing that the book obviously wouldn't give a glimpse into all the ways that such relationships suck. I remember looking at her for a long time and thinking how much this request did not seem like her. Yet she was so adamant about it that it just made me realize that you can never truly know somebody. She has always been a one-man kind of woman, at least as far as I believed, but she was showing me something different. I've been cheated on in the past, and I've dealt with trust issues in relationships countless times. To me, this just felt like that all over again. How are you meant to trust somebody that you know is walking out of the house to get plowed by other men, and then she walks back into the house like nothing happened? At that point, I felt something snap in me, and I knew that our relationship was over. The mere suggestion of an open marriage was something I couldn't deal with because it was evidence of a way of thinking that I can never get behind. It felt like I had been living a lie with her all these years, even though I recognized it might have been a new thought for her. So I just looked at her and made sure to express how little I wanted to do this. Part of me hoped that she would say I shouldn't bother her anymore and that she had changed her mind, but nope, she just stared at me. Clearly, my response wasn't what she had been waiting for. She just wanted to hear me say yes to the whole thing. Eventually, I said yes so that we could move on. I asked her if there were any rules that we needed to follow, and she said there were none at all. That didn't sound right to me, though. I didn't consider myself to be an expert on open relationships, so I asked her whether there were any limits on who we could approach. According to her, it would feel unnatural if we pulled ourselves away from people we had a natural attraction to. At that point, I solidified in my head that we couldn't do this anymore. I had a strong feeling that she might have wanted to sleep with someone who was a bit too close to home, and she was doing all of this to give herself a pass without it being cheating. I saw it as clear as day. But here's the thing. I know that I want nothing else to do with her. Some people might say that's extreme, and maybe I've been reading too many open relationship or marriage posts from here, but asking for an open marriage was such a slap in the face for me. It feels like such a blight on a relationship that has been fine for the last several years. But if she wants it that badly, I'll give her what she's looking for. I'm not a bad-looking guy, so I'm going to have fun with this as much as I can. In the meantime, I'm going to find a divorce lawyer and have him ready to go as soon as it's needed. I'll be sure to let all of you know any updates, if there are any. Well, comparing your marriage to an aged cheddar isn't exactly romantic. I feel like nobody wants to hear that, and the same goes for an open marriage. 9.5 times out of 10, if she's asking for an open marriage, she's already opened the can of worms without you even knowing. Update 1. Well, this entire open marriage thing has gone nuclear, and the best part is that I'm not the one feeling the fallout the most. It's the person who wanted it so badly who was crying her eyes out over the entire thing. I guess it helped a lot that I had already signed out of the marriage mentally. Looks like that wasn't a bad decision after all. So here's how it went. The first 2 weeks or so seemed relatively calm. I had no idea if she was actually sleeping with other people or just not telling me about it, since we hadn't discussed whether we'd be talking about the things we did or not. For me, I wasn't planning to boast, but I would find sneaky ways to clue her in on things that seemed a lot better to me. It was just after the first 2 weeks that I spotted her dressing up really nicely, and it was only then that she told me she had a date. When I asked, "Date?" she looked at me as if I were stupid before pointedly reminding me that we were in an open marriage. I told her that I obviously hadn't forgotten that, considering that I had tried on about 3 occasions within 2 weeks to change her mind, but she didn't budge. I felt it was going to be purely physical, not regular romantic things. I expressed that to her, but she started to get pissed, so I just dropped it. However, it was at that point that I decided I was going to take this thing seriously, and I wanted to show her how stupid she was to even propose this concept. I had no idea who she was going out with, but since she was the one who talked about no one being off limits, the very first thing I did was call Suzanne, one of her coworkers who I had met countless times. The thing about Suzanne was that I had always been able to tell that she liked me. She would laugh at the most basic things I said, get extra touchy if Adriana looked away for a few seconds, and she would send cozy messages on special occasions. I could just tell that she liked me a lot, and despite the fact that she was far from my type and a little older, I knew she'd be the perfect place to start if I wanted to make things sting at some point. So, I sent Suzanne a message saying that she popped in my mind, and I just wanted to say hi. I had never texted her first in all the time I had known her, so I knew that would certainly grab her attention. And it did. The response was extremely energetic. I could tell that she was giddy. So on and on we talked, and I finally told her that I'd love to take her out for coffee and talk. She wanted to do it that same night, but I told her that we should leave it until the next day. When we eventually met, I felt like she was overdressed for coffee, but I knew she was trying to impress me. I appreciated the effort from her regardless. We began to have some small talk, and as soon as I could, I casually let it drop that my wife had proposed that we get into an open marriage. Suzanne seemed to hesitate for a bit before she started trying to convince me that open marriages really aren't that bad. I think she must have been against the idea, like all people should be, but then she realized she'd never have a chance otherwise. It's easier for women to find partners to sleep with. I don't even know who'd want to sleep with me. I felt like I was setting up a chessboard, and Suzanne was making the exact moves that I wanted her to, because after a long pause, her response was, "I would." It was so quiet that I wanted to ask her to repeat what she said, but I wasn't going to put her through that much discomfort. I needed her as much as she needed me. Well, fast forward. I followed her over to her place, and we did the deed. I'd have to say, if I were less of a man, I might have stuck around for the perks of an open marriage. It was indeed very fresh to sleep with someone new, but it wasn't my idea, and it wasn't something I'd have suggested first, so I was merely following through with the regimen that Adriana wanted so badly. Me and Suzanne had a thing a few times, and it was nice. However, I realized that I was going to have to dial things up to 11 when I got a phone call from one of my guys. Let's call him Eddie. He told me that he had something extremely serious to talk to me about, and we met up soon after that. Eddie said that my wife had reached out to him, and after a lot of prevaricating, she asked him whether he knew that we were in an open marriage. He didn't know because he was one of my closest friends, so I wasn't going to keep something as big as that from him. He said yes, and she seemed relieved. Eventually, she got to the point and said that she'd love it if they could meet up. He asked her whether she thought I'd be okay with that, but she only said, "We both know the ground rules. It's fine." I was speechless on the phone because it all seemed to make sense at that point. It was like she knew that she wanted Eddie from the very start, and after so many years of my friendship with him, she realized she could get him through legal means. It explained why she didn't want to set a rule for us not to sleep with anyone who was too close to home. It was actually quite baffling to me that she took things to that extent, because she wanted to satisfy her fantasy with my best friend. I genuinely blamed all the smut that she had gotten into reading. Anyway, Eddie said no to her. She tried to get him to crack, but he stuck to his guns. It was at that point that she begged him not to tell me, even going to the extent of lying that one of our rules was not to talk about the people we were seeing. He told her he wouldn't tell me, and supposedly this call was happening mere moments after he promised her that. This is one reason why Eddie is my best friend. His loyalty has never been in question. However, it was at that point that I knew I had to go nuclear too. She wanted an open marriage where friends and maybe even family weren't off limits. I was going to give her precisely what she wanted. So we pulled up to the house of the last member of her little clique of really good friends, Sarah. While parked in my car across the street, I called her to ask if she was home, and she said that she was. That's when I got out and knocked on her door. When she answered, she was extremely confused to see me, but I told her that I was in the area and just felt like I hadn't seen her in a long time. She didn't seem to doubt me, since it had truly been a very long time since we had seen each other. There was a lot of small talk, and eventually I let the open marriage line drop before acting like I wasn't supposed to be talking about it. "Oh, I already know all about that. Feel free to talk about it if you want to." It wasn't surprising that she knew, so I started painting a sob story where I felt like my wife was having the fun she wanted from the whole thing, but that I hadn't found my own fun in the situation. She didn't say much to all of that, but she looked like she was thinking when she asked me if I would like something to drink. That was when I knew that I was in. About an hour later, everything was done, and again, I had a pretty good time. It was at that point that she started to fret, but I assured her that everything was going to be fine. It was within the rules of our arrangement. It was only then that she started to calm down. I realized that I never could have had such an easy time with it if Adriana's friend wasn't as loose as she was. I had heard more than enough gossip about her to know that it wasn't going to be too much of a challenge unless I simply wasn't her type. When I got home, my wife asked me where I had been, but I chose not to answer, hoping that she'd drop it. However, she asked again, so I knew she was already starting to get annoyed for not getting an answer. For the first time, I decided not to waste time, so I told her that I had been at Sarah's house. Needless to say, that's when all hell broke loose. I could tell that she was trying not to act panicked, but she asked me what I had been doing there. I was very intentional about not answering promptly, and that's when she started to get agitated. Normally, I would have raised my voice at her and told her to stop being so pushy, but since I was feeding off her discomfort, I didn't mind one bit. I don't think we should be talking about this. That part really set her off. She started ranting about how Sarah was her friend and not mine, so if there was anything that I was doing there, she deserved to know. But we hadn't been vocal about the things we'd been doing under the new arrangement, so why do I have to start now? I knew that was enough to answer her question, and she was speechless. I could almost see her brain scrambling to process what I had just said, but there was really only one interpretation. Before she could even say anything, I said, "Didn't you say no one was off limits, but one of my best friends? Are you serious? You couldn't find anyone else in the world?" It had to be one of the closest people to me. It was obvious she was assuming I didn't know that she had approached my friend first. To be honest, that's why I didn't just stop at her coworker. I would have kept friends out of it if not for that. I just laughed and asked her if she really wanted to go down that route. I wanted her to commit to acting superior because I was about to slap her in the face with her hypocrisy if she gave me the chance. I asked again, but she said nothing. I just nodded, agreeing with her decision to say nothing because I knew that if I actually started talking about how she had tried to sleep with my friend first, I'd end up tearing into her. That was when she said that she didn't want to do the open marriage thing anymore. According to her, she hadn't thought it through well enough. I interrupted her there and reminded her that she literally told me back when we first talked about it that she wasn't going to let go of it because she had thought it through. Now, she didn't think it through? She started crying at that point, and I paid it no mind. "Please, let's just go back to the way things were. I made a mistake." I laughed. I don't know where it came from, but I laughed hard and long, and it was very clear that parts of it stung her hard. "This is what you wanted. I don't know if you wanted it because you wanted past cheating to be forgiven or whether it was all to get to Eddie. Either way, you messed up, and now you don't want to do this anymore? Well, great. Neither do I. I'm done. Pack your things and leave." At that point, she started full-on wailing, but I just walked out of the room and went to sit in the garage. One thing I was thankful for was that our daughter had gone off to college, so she didn't need to be in the midst of all this drama. It was there that I messaged my lawyer to tell him I was ready to go through the divorce process. She eventually left the house without too much of a fight, and that was it. That was a few days ago. I have the papers ready to be served, and hopefully, the final phase of this relationship won't stress me out too much. Well, she just wanted to scratch a very specific itch, one involving my best friend of all people. Actions have consequences, and she clearly didn't anticipate hers coming back around so swiftly. On another note, it's great that your daughter is out of the house and doesn't have to witness any of this. Update 2. All I can say is thank goodness the entire saga is finally over. And for that, I can't be any more grateful. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that a certain part of me feels incredibly empty after all of this, since this was a person I was married to for 15 years and whom I have known for even longer. Anyway, I'll skip through the boring part, which is that I got someone to serve her with the papers. She called me and started raging, which wasn't unexpected. I let her do all the yelling and shouting she wanted, though it was a bit more annoying that she felt it was necessary since I thought her moving out should have made it clear that I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. I think my lack of a reaction sort of calmed her down, and then she went into pleading mode, but I had nothing to say to her. I had thought about the decisions a lot longer than she had likely thought about the open marriage that had brought us to this point. She called me a few times after that, pleading, and one time she even came over, I think with the intention to seduce me, but I didn't even let her get that far. From there, we went into the actual divorce process, and that's when she apparently intended to bleed me dry. For reference, I work in a marketing role at a company headquarters in our city, and she works as a teacher. I've always earned more than her, so that really put me at a disadvantage. The good thing was that my lawyer was great. He had me scour my text messages for anything that indicated the open marriage was her idea. He knew it might not sway things if we didn't get the right judge, but it was worth a shot. Thankfully, there was a day I was at work when I asked her to rethink the decision, and her being adamant was right there in the text. I also had texts of her admitting that the open relationship and wanting to involve my friend was the wrong move. Needless to say, we couldn't agree on a split because her lawyer wanted a lot more than was reasonable for her. I was glad we didn't need to add a custody battle to the whole thing. Eventually, we had to go in front of a judge, and that was where things ended pretty quickly. The judge saw the situation as a woman who selfishly sabotaged a relationship for physical reasons and didn't think the decision through nearly as much as she should have. He acknowledged my point, which was that things likely wouldn't have gone the way they did if she hadn't made a decision that she ended up regretting. However, at the same time, he realized that considering the large disparity in our earnings, he couldn't leave her with nothing. That part was disappointing, but nothing my lawyer said would change his mind. So, she ended up getting a 5-year alimony arrangement, though to be very honest, I could do without that money. I'd rather have been done with it. I got the house, though, and kept the car, which was good enough for me. Just as the icing on the cake, I sent text messages to all of our friends and family to inform them of our divorce. I specifically said that I wouldn't be going into details in order to protect A's privacy. I phrased it like that to make it look bad, and for those who asked me over and over what happened, I eventually told them. I got a few angry calls from her when some of them had said a bit too much to her, but again, I didn't care that much. But yeah, that was the end of my 15-year marriage. Such a stupid way for things to end, but I realized that I'd take the remaining 40 years of my life, hopefully alone, rather than with someone who had chosen sleeping with other people over us. 5 years of alimony might sting, but keeping the house and the car, along with knowing that I stood my ground, is still a win. I think the most important thing is the fact that I'd rather move forward without her than stay with someone like her. You set the tone, Opie. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have done anything differently? Anyways, goodbye for now, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.